Hello, you are going to be listening to a webinar on the new coronavirus funding tracker that has been prepared by the Auditor State's Office and has been posted to our intranet. This presentation is being presented by the Center for Audit Excellence. We are going to spend the next few minutes going over our coronavirus funding tracking spreadsheet. So first, I'm going to just share how the spreadsheet was developed. We went through the 3 acts that have been passed to date, the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act, Families First Coronavirus Act, and the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Securities Act, the CARES Act. So we went through all those acts, basically noting anything we thought Ohio might receive the funding for, either programs we already know that we're getting in Ohio or based on the descriptions that were in the acts of that Ohio entities might have a possibility of receiving these funds. So from that point, we went out to the federal agencies' websites and started looking at what more specific information we could have on those programs. And you'll see some of the links to that information in the spreadsheet on what exact entities were eligible to apply. Some of them actually have lists of entities that they already have decided they are giving appropriations to. So we kind of went in with those lists, verified that to what we had, and then we went out to our state agency websites to see what kind of information they may have available. Then we put it all together and put it in this spreadsheet. So there's a caution note up here. I will let you guys read that, but basically the one thing I do want to point out regarding this is this information is changing daily. The federal agencies, they kind of got the money, they're still getting the money, are putting out guidance on what the funds can be used for. Every federal agency is handling this a little bit differently. Some of them, got this information up pretty quick. Some of them, are just still putting pieces out here and there. So this is going to be constantly monitored by our office. We will provide updates as we get those updates. So this spreadsheet is going to be a living document. We will keep track of the dates. We'll put the dates on there so you'll know from the version you have if anything has changed. If you go out and look in 3 days and it's still the same date, then you'll know that you have the most recent version. So we're going to just go through the spreadsheet so you can kind of see what the makeup of it is. So you'll see there are several columns this way, and if you scroll the whole way down through it, we have got about 90 different things that we found related to our entities. Or actually, we're up to a little over 90 and counting. So when you look at this, the first thing I want to point out is all of these columns, you can use these column headings to filter them. So you can filter it depending on your column. You can look for a specific program name, a specific CFDA number. You can put them in ascending order, descending order. If you know exactly what you're looking for, you can type it in the search bar and have that pop up so you're only looking at that information. We'll go over some of those things as we go through this. So the first thing we have is the CFDA number, and that is your Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance number, and that is assigned by the federal government with each specific federal program. So you'll see the next column, we have our federal program names, has a set number to go with it. If you are subject to a single audit and you are completing a schedule of federal expenditures, your federal schedule, and then you also have to complete your data collection form, both those items are required to be put on those schedules and the form. So one thing to point out when you're going through these CFDA numbers, and we'll talk more about this a little bit on the other tab, how each agency is handling this is kind of up in the air. Some of them are using existing CFDA numbers. Some of them are using new CFDA numbers. If it's a new program that hadn't existed prior to this, that it's something specific to the COVID response, then that obviously would have a new CFDA number. And some of them we're just not sure about. So when you go through here, you'll see some of these columns, some of the rows have the CFDA number highlighted. And that is because that is our best guess to what the CFDA number is right now. Based upon what we were able to find out, this is the CFDA number that exists now. We didn't see anything listing a new number, but as that information comes forward, we will continue to update those. The next column, as I said, is just your federal program name. So if you know your program's name, you maybe don't know the CFDA number, you can come up here and you can search for it. If you have no idea what either of those are, that's fine. We still have ways for you to be able to track that down. The next column is the type. So you'll see when I pull this up, a lot of the focus we were talking about when we're talking about single audits and grants, there is a lot more things that these acts have established outside of those. So we're going to just briefly go through the different things that you may be seeing when you're going out and looking at the different funding types. So an appropriation, that is when the acts that the federal government has set aside this block of money for this particular program. A cooperative agreement is when both the federal government and the non-federal entity are working on a project and both have substantial involvement. So they're not just passing the money through to you and saying, okay, here is what we're agreeing to, we're giving you this money, you're doing the program, at the end you'll let us know what happened. Both the federal government's going to have much more involvement. The next one is flexibility / waivers. Depending on the agency you're dealing with, they use either term and they kind of have the same meaning, and that is just the typical requirements associated with this, that they've changed something to it. So some examples of this would be that maybe there's reporting that's due every month, and because of people working from home, offices being closed, that they have waived that you have to file that reporting for a couple months, or they've extended that. They've given you more flexibility on those deadlines. Another example would be the purposes of money you're receiving. If it's money you're typically receiving, that they've expanded what you're allowed to spend that money on. Maybe before you wouldn't have been able to buy PPE with that grant program, but that is something they've added more flexibility to allow you to spend those funds to help with your response. Grants is one we already talked about, and I think it's one of the more common things that people think of. But even when you see the grants here, you'll see a lot of different options that are here. So what this is some of these are additional items we'll talk about, and some of these are if there's a grant and they've granted some waivers with that, then you can go through and it will show everything for that particular program. So we'll just do this as an example. So if you wanted to see a grant that had, let's just see, grants, flexibilities, and waivers. So you can click like this, and it will bring up the program. This is one we actually don't know the CFDA number on, and then it will show you all this information on that. So when you go over, when you scroll over, you will see listed what some of the flexibilities and waivers are for that specific program. And if you just go to select all, it brings everything right back up. So expanded assistance is one that it can have a couple of different meanings. One of them is that it's expanding the program that's already out there. It could be that they're giving more assistance to people. So something like a SNAP program that's already out there, they may change the income guidelines. They may want to be serving more people. They may get away from having a waiting period in there like they have with some of the unemployment items. So that's some of the things you'll see with expanded assistance. Then you'll see one that's expanded assistance with reimbursements. That just means that there could be certain things that is your entity would pay for them and could receive reimbursements for the federal government for various items. Then when you go down here more, you'll see formula. Formula grants is what it kind of sounds like. It's being done with a formula. So Ohio may be eligible to receive this pot of money and is going to divide it up to all the schools in Ohio based upon the number of kids that receive free and reduced lunch in that school. So they'll go through, figure that out, and have a formula, and that's how your allocation is. The flip side of this is a competitive grant where you fill out an application based on a specific project and what your costs are going to be with that. The agency will then go through, evaluate it against their criteria, and award you that money based upon what you requested. In a formula grant, you're just getting a set amount. You're not asking for that. Then you will see direct, and then you'll see payments to states. So we're seeing a lot of this already is some of the programs, when we were able to find their specific information on allocations, they are giving money to Ohio, but some of those also are giving money directly to entities, some counties, some cities. It just kind of varies. And we'll talk about the allocation links here in a second. But if you are seeing that all of a sudden you have something pop up in your bank account from an entity and you're not sure what it is, you can go through here and start looking at, okay, what kind of things is my entity getting, and it kind of help you backtrack into what that money may be. Then the last thing I want to point out here is loans. So there are a couple of programs that are out there that are loan programs that were established by these acts. So a lot of this is grants and the flexibilities we talked about, but there is a possibility you could be an entity that is seeing where you're getting some money loaned to you by the federal government. We do have those links to those in there where you can find more information. Next we go to, this is just where we found this information at in the acts. So it will tell you which act it is, what section of the act it was found in. So if you want to go out and look at what that exact language is, you'll have a blueprint of how to get to it. Then the next column is one that I think is a pretty key column for everyone. This is based upon what we could find. Who can this money go to? So when you go and pull this down, you will see a large list of entities, everything from airports to libraries to state and local health departments. So if you are sitting out here going, hey, I don't know what's all out here for my entity, this is a great place where you can go. You can select your entity type, and it will bring out all the funding that we've found to this point that your entity could have a shot at getting. So you can go out, take a look at some of the links there, and see if your specific situation would meet these requirements. Our next one is just the federal office it's coming from. So it will be our federal agency, and then just like our offices, they have separate departments and divisions of where specifically who's in charge of this program. So if you have questions or trying to find more information on their website and you're going out there looking, this will kind of give you an idea of where to go to start looking for your questions. Our next tab, or column, is info on allocations. So this is anything that we were able to find that was talking about allocations. So as we go through and look at some of these and you pull them up, some of them it's just saying that here's how much money we have to give, here's who we're giving it to. Some of it will actually be, depending on the agency and where they're at in their process, it actually has a list that will go through and say, here's every single entity we're giving this money to, and here's how much money you're getting. Then eligibility guidelines, this was anything we could find out there that was talking specifically about what you had to do to get this money, who could get this money. So if you're gone through, you found everything for your entity type, and you're going, okay, I want to know more about this. This would be a good place to go to see what exactly these requirements are. If you have to have specific programs, if you have to have a specific population, things along those lines, that's where you can find more information on this. Then our last column here is for allowable activities. And this is just saying what the grant is going to be allowed to be used for. When you look through some of these, you'll see the amount of information we have in these greatly varies. Some of them you'll see the section references to, those are the sections from where they were found in the acts, And that's all the information we really have right now is what the acts are saying about these programs. Then you'll see some where agencies have actually put out more information on here's this money, here's what you're going to be able to do with this. So once again, if you are getting funding or thinking about applying funding, that's something you're going to want to pay attention to before you go through and start applying for it, of having an idea of, okay, if we get this money, what can we actually do with this? And are we going to be able to do this in the time frame that this grant is going to allow us to? All right, we're going to move over to the next tab now, which is just some additional disclosures to put out here. So this, we already talked about how we came up with the tracker and compiled it. The next is, what are the single audit challenges? So first of all, for those of you who don't know, if you have over $750,000 of expenditures in your fiscal year, you then become subject to a single audit. And there's a lot of nuances that go with a single audit to begin with, but there are a lot of questions that we're already seeing coming from entities in calls we've been involved with on, this money, and it's coming out and they want to get the money to everyone quickly, but it's leaving some questions that haven't been answered yet. So these are just some things. I'm going to point out a couple of the highlights on this for you, but are these programs all going to be subject to the Uniform Guidance Act? Which would mean, are they going to be a single audit? Do they have to follow the Uniform Guidance rules and requirements, which are found at 2 CFR 200? There are certain cost principles that are out there. There are certain things you have to do if you subrecipient that have a subaward with that money. So are those going to come into play? The biggest one that's out there right now is the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Is it going to be subject to that? And as of right now, we don't know the answer to that. Another one to put out here, what allowable costs can this funding be used for? I mentioned this right at the end, that last column we went through. We do have some information on this, but not all the programs have put that information out there yet. And agencies are starting to distribute this money, and people are receiving it and not really knowing what they can do with that. Another one is, we talked about the challenges with the CFDA numbers, but for those of you who are around when ARA came through about 10 years back, there were some specific ways on your CFA that they wanted ARA to be reported. So is it going to have to be all the COVID funds going to have to be shown separately? Are they going to be put in clusters with other federal programs? All things that we aren't sure of yet. Other one is, when will the compliance supplement be available? And when it does come out, is it going to have information in here about these programs and the things specific to COVID-19? So what I will say about this is, even though there is a list of questions there, that is all stuff that, like I said, questions that have already been brought up and discussions that are already happening. And we are going to continue to monitor those. As soon as we get that information, we will make sure that information is made known to everybody, because we know these are all things that everyone's kind of wondering and going to need to know, especially moving forward. Then our last tab is just some additional resources that we have found. So you can scroll through these and each one will have a link, but the Ohio Grants Partnership is one I want to point out. It is something the Ohio Office of Budget and Management has put out. They have put out a website. It has some coronavirus federal program information, some grants management resources, best practices, and one of the other things they will be putting up, this is a pretty new website, but they are going to be putting out funding opportunities, so specific funding opportunities within the state of Ohio. So that may be something to keep an eye at. Instead of having to go and check, 8 different agencies' websites, it might be a one-stop shop where you can find a lot of that information. Other one I want to point out is OMB Memo 2017. There's a link to it there, but the Office of Budget and Management, the Federal Office of Budget and Management, has put out several memos related to COVID-related things. Well, this one is one to point out because it has a couple things in it that were questions we were frequently getting. One was on if you could continue to charge people's salaries to federal grants, and it has some guidelines in there for that. The other one was on certain costs that typically wouldn't be allowable. If you had to, cancellation fees from things you had planned on doing and they got canceled because of COVID, then it has some information on that. The other one that's in this that a lot of people need to know is it extended your audit filing. If you're filing a single audit, you typically file that 9 months after your fiscal year end. And what this did is it extended that 6 months. It is something that they're going to keep monitoring, but right now it's any audits up until June 30th, 2020. That OMB has the right to change that, but that is what it says right now. So I definitely recommend you take a look at that memo. It may be one you want to bookmark or print out because there is a lot of good information in that. The other thing is, we've talked a lot about questions that are out there, questions we're getting, and as I said, we don't have all the answers to all these right now, but there are a lot that we have been able to find some answers to, and we have a frequently asked questions section on our website. You can click here to get to that, and those are also constantly being updated and added to. So if you have a question out there that you do not think has been answered and you can't find it anywhere, definitely contact us. And the saying, if you have the question, someone else probably has the same question, they're just afraid to ask. So at the end of this, there'll be an email address that you can send those questions to, and we definitely will look into them. Then the final thing that's on here is the AICPA Government Audit Quality Center has put together a summary of all the things audit related, financial statements, like we just talked about the single audit, some HUD filings, and it has put together kind of a chart of what all these has been extended, what the extensions, how long they're going, and kind of has that all in one place. So you don't have to kind of look all over to try to find that. That is going to wrap up us talking about our tracker. If you have any questions regarding the tracking spreadsheet, on the information contained in it, how to use it, or if you have any coronavirus questions that were not contained in this spreadsheet, you may reach us at the following information. Also, as a reminder, the spreadsheet will be constantly updated, so remember to check back as more information is added to that. Thank you for your time and have a nice day.